Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me Stories of Hope, Gratitude, and Resilience. I am so lucky today to have our guest, Dr. Emilio Justo. He is a renowned ophthalmologist and cosmetic surgeon specializing in refractive cataract surgery and CO2 laser. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask him to pronounce this big old word for me. Uh,
Blepharoplasty.
Oh, okay. Got it. With nearly 50,000 procedures performed since 1989. Whew. As a Cuban refugee who emigrated to the United States at age 3, his journey underscores the transformative power of patience, perseverance, and self discipline. His August 2023 TEDx Cherry Creek talk, Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success, has amassed over 6 million views, making it the third most viewed TEDx video globally in 2023. His best-selling book, The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, followed in June of 2024 and became a #1 Amazon bestseller. In February 2024, he delivered a second TEDx talk, Unleashing the Drive Within, the Obsession Advantage to Unprecedented Success at TEDx Western U, which has garnered over 1 million views. He's married for 20 years with 3 teenage children, and he and his family enjoy traveling and exploring exotic destinations. Thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so very much, Kelly. I greatly look forward to it. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to our journey together here.
Me as well. So, just to get us started off, if you could just kind of give us, I gave a brief bio, but if you can tell our listeners who maybe don't know a lot about your work, just a bit about your background and how you came to be on this journey.
Well, very good. Well, Kelly, as you correctly pointed out, I am a Cuban refugee coming to the United States with my parents at the age of almost four, three, almost four. And we escaped via Mexico. And then when we settled into the United States, as church organizations back in the mid 1960s were sponsoring Cuban refugees' entry into the United States, the church that sponsored us, we settled into Gary, Indiana. And Kelly, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but Gary, Indiana is the home, the origin of Michael Jackson and the Jackson Five. That's where they were from. That's where they got their initial start. But anyhow, that's where we settled. My grandparents, who escaped Cuba a few months later, uh, were sponsored by a different church, and they settled in a small college town in Northwest Missouri called Tarkio College. And the relevance to that is that as my parents were getting settled in the United States, my father was working 2 full-time jobs, one as a steel worker, one as maintenance and janitorial for the church. My mother went 3 hours south to Indiana University in Bloomington to restudy all over again because she had her doctorate in education at the University of Havana, but coming to the United States, none of those credentials transferred. So they made the courageous decision to actually send me to grow up with my grandparents on the campus of Tarkio College from kindergarten through fourth grade. And that was just an incredible experience, absolutely incredible. Surrounded by college students all the time. My lovely grandparents, who were like second parents to me, didn't know a lick of English, but just great memories. And it's interesting today, although Tarkio College unfortunately went out of business after 100 plus years, but now it's been somewhat resurrected. And I'm actually on the board of directors as a volunteer for Tarkio College, as it's getting a fresh new lease on life, so to speak.
That's
And
beautiful.
so, in 5th grade, I then, moved my grandparents and I moved back to Indiana to reunite with my parents. My parents had saved enough money to, purchase a home. My father now could only work one job, which was nice. My mother was teaching high school Spanish, and there I did my growing up from fifth grade through the end of high school. After high school, I went to the University of Michigan, their integrated medical program, which was an accelerated 6 year program. And so I did the undergraduate, my college and medical school at the U of M, and I graduated medical school when I was 23, which was exceptionally young. After that, I did my 4 years of residency in Washington, D.C. at the Washington National Eye Center. And subsequent to that, that's when I moved to sunny Arizona in the Phoenix metropolitan area. And that's when I started practice in 1989. So I just started August 1st. I just started my 36th year of practice as an ophthalmologist, cataract surgeon, and oculoplastic surgeon. So I still love it to this day, and it keeps me busy full time. But but going back to, I'm sorry, I kind of digress, but going back to one of your original questions, how I got onto this journey. So a year ago, just before doing my first TEDx, as I tell a lot of people, and it sounds kind of odd, but as I get a little bit older, having just turned 40, ha ha ha, as a joke, but as I get a little bit older, I look back at my life and the things I'm very proud of the things I've accomplished. I'm also very proud of all the failures that I've gone through and I've been able to bounce forward from because I've had plenty of those. But I do look at my life and I look at the mortality of life and I think, gosh, I'm not going to be here forever. And I'd like to leave a legacy to my family, to my children, maybe someday to my grandchildren. Hopefully not too soon because they're still somewhat young. But I started thinking about these things, and that's really what inspired me just to get on the initial TEDx journey. That whole delayed gratification talk was really spurred on primarily because of that. Throughout my life, my mantra inside my head, right? I didn't really talk about this, but I've always had this mantra inside my head that I've kept very private. And this mantra has been what I call my Cuban triad for success. And that involves number one, self discipline, number two, resilience, and number three, delayed gratification. So when I was going to write my first TEDx talk, I really wanted to write it on the entire triad, but some of the coaches around me said, "Hey, that's just way too much to write about for a 10 or 12 minute talk." So I decided I'm just going to talk on delayed gratification because that's really what my life has been all about. And not by choice, it's just as an immigrant, that's what it is. You have to delay gratification and you have to put aside sometimes those immediate pleasures in favor of that later, often greater reward. And so that's what I wrote about in my first TEDx, and it was incredibly well received. Well,
What's
long answer to your question, Kelly, I apologize.
No, no, that was a perfect answer, and I love hearing kind of your origin story of coming to the United States, and really that whole message of, you know, setting a goal or having a dream that's maybe a little further down the road, your entire family just lived that and really instilled that power in you to understand that things don't necessarily happen overnight, that you have to put the work in sometimes, but that the reward is great. It's just what a beautiful story for your family, of coming and making such a success of their lives here in the United States. That's wonderful.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that, and yeah, I mean, to my core, in my soul, I mean, I am definitely a believer in delayed gratification. I preach it to my family, especially to our kids, and they
Yeah.
seem to, generally understand it. They nod their head, they say they get it. But, the reality in my view is that I'm not so sure they really do get it, and I don't fault them for that. They're young, they're teenagers. In today's society, it's nothing like when I was growing up, and perhaps even when you were growing up. We didn't have all this instant gratification. We didn't have,
Mhm.
the social media. I mean, we didn't even have computers when I was growing up. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that, right? You'd have to. I remember in high school when I had to do a research project or a paper at home, because my parents placed a high emphasis on education. They did save up enough money to buy me an encyclopedia set.
Yes.
Actually, two, believe it or not, two for that matter. I had Encyclopedia Britannica for those of you and the viewers who remember
I remember it
encyclopedias,
well.
and then I also had an easier to read version, which was called Compton's Encyclopedia. It was much easier to read. Encyclopedia Britannica, I remember, was just so detailed and so esoteric and had these big words that many of which I didn't even know. Compton's was really kind of a version that had everyday words and would still give you the same information. So we actually had two encyclopedia sets, and that's what I used for much of my research in high school.
I remember from my research papers, we had encyclopedias as well, but I also remember going to the public library and trying to explain that to my son when he was a teenager, and they had tablets and phones, and everything was just right at the end of their fingertips, and we actually had to go and search. And I do feel, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I do feel like that that approach of being having to sit down and look in a book and take the time to read it and transcribe information on paper with a pen. I just feel like that part of learning, the value of that has been lost a little bit. I would love to see that come back a little bit more. Um,
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree. I mean, I think so many things in our lives really were better kind of in the old days, as I call it, at least old
yeah.
days for me. Um, I mean, yes, there are great things as technology and the world has evolved that have become better, and certainly who could imagine life without a cell phone now, right?
Mhm.
But I got to agree with you that sometimes the simplicity of the way we were brought up forced us to take active measures for our own well-being, for our own education, for our own knowledge, that we wouldn't just Google something to find out. Like now, if you don't know the meaning of a word, you Google it. If you don't know how to get someplace, you Google it. I mean, man, growing up, I remember, we would uh, do a drive in the summer. Our big vacation was we would drive from Northwest Indiana to Miami Beach, Florida. And this is the old Miami Beach. This isn't the South Beach that exists now. This is where all the retirees hung out. And of
Mhm.
course, with my Cuban heritage, Miami Beach
Yeah.
was driven by the Cuban community. So we would love going down there, having the Cuban food. Um, but I remember in all those drives, we would go to AAA because AAA did exist. But back then, they would have what they called these triptychs, which were these maps that they would put together based upon what destination you were going to. And they would put this map together that you would then read in the car to know how to get from point A to point B. And now what? You just plug it into your iPhone or your cell phone, and it gives you the directions as you're driving, and it's really useful. I mean, I use it all the time, but man, the old school method was really quite challenging when you think of today's methods.
Because we had to think. And I think that's I always worry about that with the phone, just with myself in terms of longevity and keeping your brain active. I know myself, I can be watching a movie and Google, who is that guy in that movie, that character? How old is he? And I'll think of his age, and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And then it's out the other ear, right? I don't retain that information in the same way as if I looked at it on a piece of paper or I had to actively search to find that information. So I know we're kind of veered off on that on my soapbox there, but I do hope that, as I think maybe it's happening because even with my son now, who's in his mid 20s, he's not a big social media guy, right? He's out living his life.
Great.
And I think that I do hope that we get back to that somewhat, that we take the advantages of technology, like talking to you today. I would never meet you without it.
Right.
Uh, but also recognize that, there's a big world right beyond our nose.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, first of all, I got to say to your viewers out there, I'm highly shocked that you have a son in his 20s. That's incredible. You look like you just graduated college, so congratulations to you.
Wow, you
Um,
are talking.
but yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying, and kudos to your son for not really being into social media. I mean, I must admit, up until a year ago when I delivered my first TEDx, I did no social media whatsoever. And then I just started kind of dabbling in it, and especially this year, doing some posts and things of that nature, which is very time consuming. Um, but I can see how, particularly the youth of our world, but really people of all ages, can get so addicted to social media. I mean,
Mhm,
because once in a blue moon, I'll like look at Instagram and there'll be reel after reel. It's never ending, and many of them are extremely interesting. I mean, topics you may not think of. You could spend your entire day and night, just watching reel after reel, but at the end of that time, what do you have to show for it, right? I mean, you might say, "Well, I enjoyed it," but really it's not brought you any further in your life. And so I think in large part, when I talk to youth, I try to explain that social media, we need to break the addiction and prioritize our time to do things that are going to help nurture our mind, our soul, our education, our future. And then, as a small reward, then maybe take 30 minutes or maybe an hour if it's on the weekend or something, and maybe devote it to social media if you want to, if you really, really want to, as a small reward. But don't let it just engulf you because you're not going to really achieve the goals and dreams that you set out if you're not working on them, and you got to work on them. I mean, in life, and this is another thing I preach to our kids and try and instill in them, is that nothing comes easy. I mean, it's very, very, very few things that come easy. Occasionally something will fall in your lap. I get it. But in the general terms of life, we have to really work hard and be self-disciplined and persevere and be resilient and embrace failure. I mean, I talk about embracing failure. We have to be willing to fail in order to succeed, in order to learn from that failure and be able to succeed. So we shouldn't really shy away from failure. I mean,
mhm,
it's not that none of us enjoys failing, but even if we do fail, let's just smile in the mirror at ourselves and say, "Hey, I lost this little battle, but I'm going to win the war, and I'm going to push forward."
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I digressed again. I tend to be a bit of a blabbermouth. Sorry.
No, I know. I love it. And I love what you're saying about, I just to circle back a bit to social media. Because it's really not all that social, is it? Because I know leaders Gallup released a poll, there's an epidemic of loneliness, even though we're more connected in quotes than ever before. And and I think what we need in terms of going after our goals and becoming comfortable with failure is we have to have a sense of community that gives us courage when we feel part of the community. And as much as, um, our being friends with people on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever, that in-person community, those people show up for you, you show up for them. That gives you courage to, if you do fail, you have people surrounding you, who can help lift you back up again. But sometimes it's hard to get up on your own after a leak.
Yeah.
and all in there, but it's part of the hack. It's, I look at, even doing this interview with you today, nobody knows how many face plants I did before today with this interview. Nobody because that was part of my path to get to here. Um, so I want to jump into the exam talk now about delayed gratification because I want to hear more about this. And at first, when I read 6 million views, I was like, "Whoa, 6 million views." So for someone like yourself, you weren't really on social media prior to this. What was your reaction when your words resonated with so many people?
Well, I mean, I was in awe, and probably the person who was even in bigger awe was my wife. You know, and and she's the one who really kind of kept giving me kudos here at home and really inspiring me. I mean, I must say I owe a lot of the things that I've accomplished in my life to my wife supporting and nurturing and giving me positive reinforcement, and not necessarily dragging me through the mud when I've made some incredibly stupid and big mistakes, which I've made, which I talk about in the book. Um, so she's been a source of inspiration, and yes, so in terms of getting the views, yes, early on it was interesting. I remember I'd be at work and I'd be in the operating room in surgery, and my staff kind of knew a little bit of what was going on. And the first few months, it was like every 2, 3, 4 hours, somebody would be checking the computer in the operating room to see how many views has it increased by, and that was kind of a running joke there for a while. Um, and then I learned that one of the things that one should do to help with the YouTube algorithm, because I was so naive. I barely knew anything about YouTube, to be quite honest. And so they explained to me that when you get comments on YouTube on your video, that you need to acknowledge them, maybe give it a like, reply back, etc. So I started, looking at the comments, and it was very interesting. I mean, it was just incredible to see how people were commenting and were liking the talk, and they were being inspired. And that just was incredible positive feedback for me. I must say. I mean, it was a good feeling of satisfaction that I had done something positive for my family, for the world. Um, and so I kind of became, in a good way, I kind of became addicted to the TEDx world, because as that first talk was gaining momentum, again, it was my wife who then brought up to me and said, "Hey, this is being so well received. You've got to write a book." I mean, I'd never really thought about writing a book. I mean, I'd never done so in my life. I've read plenty of books, but never written one. And so I set my mind to it, and I devoted every single weekend, because during my work week, I just don't have time. I work, 10, 12-hour days. But on the weekends, I would devote every weekend, little by little, to writing that book. And early on, I had kind of a coach, a mentor who helped me kind of flesh out some ideas. And then after that, it was my wife helping me flesh out ideas. And then I wrote that book. I mean, it may not be the most perfect book in the world, but I was on a mission and I wanted to get it signed, sealed, and delivered. So from start to finish, I think it was probably about 4 months that I,
Mhm.
had the idea, wrote the book, and got it published. And then during that process, at the same time, I'm thinking about, gee, I really enjoyed that TEDx. I think I need to do another one. And so I started writing another TEDx at the same time, and actually delivered that second TEDx well before that book was ever published. So it's kind of been an addictive cycle in a good way, and I'm hoping maybe I don't have time now, but maybe in 2025 I'm looking forward to writing a third TEDx and maybe doing the trifecta.
Yeah. I think that would be a very good plan. So, so tell us then in this TEDx talk, can you give the listeners a brief overview of what you mean when you say delayed gratification, your superpower to success? So, can you just tell people what you mean by
Yeah,
that?
I mean, in simple terms, really, in simple terms, it means that sometimes we just have to defer on some of the immediate pleasures and just pause, give it time, think about it, and wait for maybe that later, greater reward. Now, when I talk about delayed gratification, as I tell everyone, understand I'm talking about in generalities in life. I mean, I'm a core believer in it, but it doesn't mean, by no means am I telling people that they cannot have any instant gratification in their life. That would be ridiculous, right? We we
Right.
we we're, we need to have certain levels of instant gratification as we project on a goal. Let's say that we set a 1 year goal. Well, along the path, there are going to be smaller goals that one is going to achieve and try to achieve. And once you do, you want to celebrate those milestones with some small victories, small celebrations, etc. So it doesn't mean that you can't have fun, that you can't have instant gratification, but it does mean that we have to really pause. I mean, it's something as simple as, gee, you're out at the mall and you see something that just catches your eye, and you're thinking, "Oh wow, boy, I really wouldn't that be great to buy that?" And let's say it's something fairly expensive. Well, okay, just pause a second. I mean, if it's more a want and not a need, let's just pause. Let's think about it. Think about it overnight. Think about it for a week. I'll guarantee you that when you think about it for a few days or a week, when you come back and think about it again, the importance of it in your mind is going to be far diminished. And yet your pocketbook will be far enhanced by not spending that money. Now, does that mean that you can't spend money, that you should be frugal about everything? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we need to balance things and delay that instant gratification in many aspects of our lives in order to achieve that greater reward, which will be exponentially so much better. Another example would be what I talk to our kids about is, as I'm sure you can imagine having kids yourself, uh, teenagers will talk about cars and, they want a car and this and that. Well, not that there's anything wrong, by no means is there anything wrong with buying your teenager a car, but rather than, let's say, giving them that instant gratification, if they in turn, have a little part time job, start saving up some money, and once they save up enough money that maybe they can put a down payment on that car to purchase it themselves, it's going to mean so much more to them, so much more than being gifted something, right? Because it's going to be their blood, sweat, and tears, their sweat equity that they've put into it, that they're going to be so much more proud of it. They're going to take so much better care of it. Not that they wouldn't do these things if you gave it to them, but it's just going to be a better, greater reward for them.
Well, and don't you think too, with in that regard, I just it makes them self-reliant as well, right? And I think that in this time, you know, what's the term, helicopter parents, and we all just want our kids to be okay and not have to have any struggle. But sometimes, working for something or having a struggle in the short term allows you to grow as an individual. And, when as we're preparing our kids to go out and help us fix this world in some of the challenges that we see around the globe, we need more self-reliance than ever. Um, so allowing them to see that things just don't happen instantly. They don't happen overnight, and that's okay. We say the little baby steps every day to get there.
Absolutely. And two quick examples, I couldn't agree with you more, Kelly. Two quick examples. Like, for example, our oldest son, he's extremely sociable. I mean, just incredibly so, and has been from a young age. I mean, we always thought that he was kind of an adult in kids' clothes. But he's been very self-reliant when it comes to his schooling throughout, whether it be grade school, high school. Now he's in college, and he goes to his teachers. He meets with them regularly. He asks questions. He wants to learn how to do better and how to succeed. So that's wonderful for him. The other example would be our youngest, who's our daughter. We have three, our youngest, when she started eighth grade, she's in eighth grade now. But when she first started, she had a brand new math teacher, same school, but a completely different math teacher.
Mhm.
And the first week of school, I mean, she was really struggling in math because this teacher just had a completely different methodology, and she thought that he was being unreasonable and was almost picking on her and isolating her in class and making her a kind of a negative example of certain things. And so my wife and I, and especially me, because I'm very defensive about our children, maybe a little too much so, we thought, oh gosh, we need to go in there. We need to meet with the teacher, meet with the principal, and get this ironed out and blah, blah, blah. But then we paused and my wife and I talked about it and said, no, no, this really isn't the way to go about this. So instead, we counseled our daughter and said, listen, we understand the frustration you're going through, but we need for you to step up. And what you need to do is perhaps go to the chair of the math department, who happened to be her math teacher the previous year,
Mhm.
and discuss these things openly. And then, if need be, have a meeting with your current teacher. And she took those steps. She took that initiative. We are so proud of her. She took those steps, that initiative. She hammered those things and got resolution. And little by little, that teacher started showing greater respect for her. She started showing greater respect for him. And now here it is. It's her favorite teacher right now. She has an incredible relationship with him, a teacher that started out someone who she almost maybe despised is too strong of a word, but she
Mhm.
really was having difficulty with. And, I talk about this in the book as well because, as parents, we could have really messed it up for her, but we wanted her to stand up for her own, to be resilient, to solve her own problems, and to work through them by communication, right? Communication is key in every aspect of life. I mean, I'm a big advocate of communication. Whenever I see a lack of communication, it's frustrating to me, and then I speak up and communicate and say, "Hey, there's no communication here." Um, but we're so proud of her for doing that.
That is an amazing story, and you're right. You just with the power of that pause, you allow yourself to see things from a different angle and let her empower herself to take care of that situation. It brought up a memory for me. It was actually with a hockey coach for my son, and I wanted to get in there and do I really I was feeling like Mama Bear, right?
Right, right.
And it was my son who told me, "No, mom, I've got this. I'm going to take care of this. I want to take care of this on my own."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess so." Because I was really all set to do it, but he said, "I want to do this on my own." And as a parent, it was a little hard for me to take that. I wanted to, be that protective mama bear, but just as your daughter did,
Right.
they need to rise to that occasion.
Yeah, no, totally get it, Kelly, totally get it. I mean, our middle son, the one I haven't talked about, because he's I don't know, we see him, my wife and I see him as a little bit more shy or introverted, although he claims that he's not. But on
Mhm.
the surface, it seems that way. And so sometimes, my wife in particular, but me as well, we kind of get in the middle of things and stand up for him when it comes to school issues. But he keeps saying, no, stay out of it. I can handle it myself. And indeed, he can. And he does. So we're learning to basically kind of take a chill pill and take a step back because, ultimately, he can handle it. He's just a different personality than our other 2 kids, right? They're each their own person.
Yeah. And I mean, the challenge of being a parent is that delicate dance of holding on and letting go. And, you have to give them that space to come into their own. But yeah, it's not easy sometimes. It's a struggle for me, even with my son as old as he is now with the other dogs. um, so I want to talk to you about mindful decision making. So if someone, was having to come to grips with something and make a big decision for their life, what advice would you give them? Because I know that this is a concept that you.
Yes, I mean, we definitely I mean, mindful decision making is pretty much what it sounds like. You have to really think about the decisions that you're gonna make, not react swiftly, right? We've all been guilty of an instantaneous reaction, and then quite often we regret that reaction, that we acted too swiftly. So we have to just stop, pause, think about, okay, how is this going to affect either my goal of what I want the outcome to be, how is it gonna make perhaps that individual or that situation look overall or look to others? How is it gonna make me look? Maybe I'm gonna react too swiftly and it's gonna backfire on me. So again, it goes back to this whole issue of pausing and thinking it through and not being too quick to react and then think logically, don't just react emotionally, which we all do in certain circumstances, and I'm sure I know for myself I've regretted some of those reactions. So we just have to be mindful of what we're doing and the decisions that we're making to make sure that they're positive ones that will actually further our goal and further the conversation, and not be a detriment.
Mhm. I talk a lot about the ripple of our lives, and that's usually when I am making a big decision. I kind of think, okay, how is this going to ripple out? What's that going to be like? How is this going to be? And I like to meditate in the mornings, and so that's usually kind of when I try to think of it, that my bigger thoughts and goals, to come to some conclusions about it. But yeah, just that pause, and certainly in situations with conflict, I wish that someone had explained the power of the pause to me when I was younger, because I was quick to react. You know what? And I'm I I'm not completely cured of that, I don't think. I work on it every single day, but I do wish that someone had explained it to me, to just take a little breath. And this is gonna be okay if you don't immediately respond to this
Right.
email, or this,
Right.
that.
But give yourself some mercy on that, because the reality of it is that none of us, myself included, are perfect about that. But it does become, I would say, it does become a little bit easier to do and maybe a little bit more instinctual as we get older. I mean, we can preach and preach and preach to our youth, and I do believe that one should preach to the youth. But as my wife repeatedly tells me, well, youth, kids, teenagers, they don't want to be preached to. They just want to be talked to normally. I feel like I'm an educator. I'm always wanting to preach and teach, and I don't think it necessarily settles well with them. And it's just harder. These principles are very difficult to practice when you're young. I mean, they are, and I get it. I get it. So
Mm,
I don't expect perfection from any teenager by any stretch of the imagination. But if they can
yeah.
at least start taking little baby steps, um, that would be huge. I mean, those baby steps will eventually turn out to be giant footsteps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are some of the most common roadblocks that you see people kind of put up? If when trying, if you talk to people about the power of the pause or delayed gratification, and have you met with kind of, you talked about feedback on YouTube and how it really resonated with so many people, but have you also met people who said, nah, I don't know, or you, and like, and how have you addressed that?
Well, well, fortunately, I must say that the comments on the YouTube have pretty much, as best I can recollect, have all been pretty positive. But in terms of real people that I've dealt with, including one of our children who will remain nameless,
Right.
uh, sometimes the big roadblock is, well, hey, I want to enjoy my life. I want my life to be stress free, and you never know when I'm going to be gone. Here they are, a teenager. I want to enjoy the moment. This whole thing about enjoying the moment. Yeah, no, I get enjoying the moment. I try to enjoy every moment of my life, but that doesn't mean that those moments are all fun. Enjoyable moments can be working hard, persevering, discipline. I look forward to my work. Not just work in the office or in surgery, but I'm talking about just work. If I'm writing the book, for example, there's a certain fascination with the end result. That I'm doing something that's going to nourish my mind. It's going to hopefully nourish my family. It's going to nourish the world. So the big roadblock when I think back in speaking particularly to youth is that, oh, they just want, they want it now, and they don't want to have to wait a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Even a concept, for example, I have a small chapter in the book about investing, for example. Not that I'm not an investment manager or money manager or anything like that, but very basic investment principles that, frankly, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't learn until well into my adult years. Why? Because, my parents didn't have any money as immigrants. So they
Mhm.
didn't really talk about investing. They talked about trying to stay out of debt, right? My parents, especially my father, would never go into debt other than a home mortgage, but that's about it. He saved up when he had the cash, he'd pay for it cash. But now, I try and preach to the kids how important it is to, like our oldest does some part-time work, particularly when he's home on vacation or breaks. And I say to him, look, it's imperative that you set aside a bare minimum of 10% of your gross paycheck. Ideally 15%, and if you're really aggressive, 20%, but a bare minimum of 10%, and have it debited out of your account without you seeing it right off the top, and have it be directed into some sort of savings account or some sort of savings vehicle, because the power of compound interest is extraordinary. Extraordinary. So every little bit that you save when you're in your 20s, and then you fast forward to your retirement years, which comes very quickly, whether you're retiring in your 50s, 60s, or thereafter, that compound interest will be incredible. And you will see that money, just exponentially grow. But that requires, having that mindset. But if you would expect someone to get a paycheck and then have to manually transfer money out of their, let's say, checking account into a savings account, it may happen once or twice, and then they're going to stop doing it because they're going to see that money disappearing. Whereas if you do it automatically from the get-go, you don't see the money, you don't even realize that it's not there. So it's little things like that that I think can be very powerful.
That's so true, and it's easy for us to do that these days, right? There's apps that for young people with money that it automatically does a withdrawal into a savings account. Most banks now have roundups, where you spend money at a store and they'll round it up to the nearest dollar and transfer that, maybe it's 50 cents or 75 cents to a savings account. Um, I remember when my father telling me the story of when he saved up for my mother's engagement ring. And he worked in a paper mill. I grew up in Youth in Canada, and he worked in a paper mill. And one of his good friends took this container and actually welded the top on it. He was a welder in the mill, and he welded the top on it so that dad could not, open it up and dip into it on a Friday evening and go for a few beers with his buddies or something. I don't know. But that's dad told me that that's how he saved up the money to get for that ring. And there's something so beautiful about that. That he made that commitment, but he also recognized in himself which is very much what I would be like. I would need someone to weld that to that top on the container, so that you don't forget. But he had that goal, and he recognized that it was so important to him that he had to do whatever he had to do to get to it.
Right. Gosh, I remember growing up, because my parents didn't really emphasize, and maybe they simply just didn't even understand the power of compound interest, that when I was given any sort of money for birthday or holidays, et cetera, or just money that I would find out on the street, is that I had a piggy bank, believe it or not. And it wasn't a little piggy bank. I mean, it was a big piggy bank, and I would just keep adding money, and at some point, I think it must have been in high school or something, I finally emptied out that piggy bank that weighed a ton. And, I mean, it wasn't that it was a tremendous amount, but I mean, it was hundreds of dollars that had accumulated in there.
Yeah.
And, it would have been wiser, not that hundreds of dollars maybe translates into that much, but it would have been wiser to teach me, had my parents taught me at that time to maybe put that money into some sort of savings vehicle that had interest accruing so that one could at least watch that money grow a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. So what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself through this whole process of doing the TED Talks, writing a book? What has surprised you most about that you've said, "Well, I didn't really realize that about myself."
Well, I think yeah, it's such a great question. And I think really what it's shown me is that even at my, let's call it mature age, that I can still achieve, a lot of things in my life. And I hope to continue to achieve a lot more things while at the same time still continuing my traditional job. But so it's shown me that I do still have a certain power of resilience and perseverance and determination and self-discipline. The things I've lived my life based upon and am now preaching upon, I'm still practicing. Now, has it always been that perfect? No. As I share in the book and I share openly with other podcasts, et cetera, that probably what you haven't asked so far, so I'll beat you to the punch, Kelly,
Yes.
is that if you were to ask me what was the one greatest failure or poor decision making, is 20 years ago, I lost track for a small period of time of that delayed gratification that was in my core. And I chose to pursue instant gratification. And what do I mean by that? Well, 20 years ago, at least in the United States, I don't know how the economy was in Canada, but in the United States, we had a very, very hot real estate market where
Mhm.
prices of homes were just skyrocketing. And being able to obtain a mortgage was extremely easy. It was so unregulated that you could just sign and get a mortgage for 95 to 100% of the purchase price, literally 95 to 100%. And so very little money down. And so I thought to myself, oh, well, here's a good get rich quick scheme is I'm going to just start buying residential real estate rental homes. And so in a matter of 1 year, Kelly, oh, and I'm just so embarrassed to tell your viewers this, but I purchased 20 homes, each valued between 400 to 500,000 US dollars. And I quickly learned in renting them that basically I couldn't keep it going because the amount that I was getting in rent was far less than the amount I was paying for the monthly mortgage. So,
Right.
I mean, a dumb idea. I get it. I don't know. I just had one of those periods in my life. I don't know what I was thinking. My wife told me from the beginning it was a bad idea, and I just ignored her. I should have known better. But ultimately, it was very stressful. I mean, I lost a ton of money, almost lost my entire life savings, or almost chased me into bankruptcy. But somehow, I was able to dig out of that. I was able to, little by little, get rid of the homes, um, and ever since then, I've gone back to my roots and I've embraced delayed gratification. And the last 20 years of my journey, it's gone exponentially up as I've gotten back to my roots. So
Right.
it's an embarrassing story, and one that I'm not proud of. But ultimately, as I think back, hey, it's part of what's gotten me to where I am in life. So had I not experienced that, had I not had that failure, had I not learned from it, uh, these last 20 years may not have gone as well as they have. So I embrace it, and I thank God for my mistake. I thank
Mhm.
God even more that I learned from my mistake. And I thank God even more that I have a wonderful wife who didn't rub my face in it and who basically helped me bounce back and bounce forward from that mistake.
I love bounce forward. I'm going to be using that from now on. I really like that. Instead of bouncing back, bouncing forward. And we've all been in a situation where we've made mistakes where we're not, we just, oh, what was I thinking? But, and I mean, this is just me passing my opinion. I'm meeting you for the first time today on this podcast. But do you feel like, yes, that was not a great moment for you, but that somehow really focused your vision and what has manifested in this book and these TED Talks, the wonderful work that you're doing and the people that you're helping, you probably wouldn't have felt that same push to return to those roots and get that message out without that stumble.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why, as I just said, that I have learned to embrace the failure and truly, as crazy as it sounds, I wouldn't have said this at the time because I was going through a period where I was very down, and it was really destroying my life, at least so I thought. But
Mhm.
I have learned to express gratitude for having gone through that and having been able to persevere and have the resilience to, as I said, bounce forward from that because that's helped in a small way shape and mold me and get me back to my roots of that delayed gratification. So I think, I think embracing that failure is okay, and it's somewhat cathartic for me to be able to talk about it and not have ill will towards it. Plus, as I think my wife would attest to this, I believe, that I'm the sort of person, just innately, it's just part of me that I don't really think back to past mistakes and past negative things, not just mistakes, but even negative things if someone mistreats me or calls me, something negative or what have you, I just don't dwell on those things. I mean, I move forward. She'll remind me of, oh, do you remember when 3 months ago such and such happened? And I'm like, not remind me. I don't even recall what you're talking about. Then she'll remind me, and I think to myself, oh, I kind of vaguely recall that, but I really don't. I just put it behind. I pretty much live in the moment and then a little bit in the future. But I
Mhm.
definitely don't live in the past. I mean, never have I done that. I do not dwell on the past.
You and my husband are very much alike. I call it his compartment. He's able to just put something in a compartment and you just keep moving forward with his life. Whereas I say, I have all these file folders in my brain. I have them, you know, um, but there's something freeing about not ruminating about the past because we can't change it anyway.
Right, right. Plus, I'm a believer that that good energy that emanates from each one of us, whether it be mental, spiritual, and just energy, whatever you want to call it. Um, if we harbor negative feelings about someone or about some situation in the past, etc., that it just drags us down and it's not going to really do anything for us in the future. So we just have to be able to let go. Another perfect example, if I can just share with you ever so briefly,
Mm.
that professionally, I talked about that personal situation insofar as the real estate, but professionally, midway through my professional career, um, the first half of my professional career, I enjoyed doing what I do. I was pretty much hands off in the office. I had a manager, administrator who took care of things. They signed the checks. I mean, they did the payroll. I mean, I was pretty much hands on and very trusting. And then a situation happened that had to do, I don't want to get too much into detail, but had to do with writing a prescription for a controlled substance that were by my name, my signature was forged, and it was brought to my attention by a pharmacist. And so
Oh,
effectively the next day, that person, that manager was out. I booted them. And they had been with me a long time, probably going on 11, 12 years. Um, and so as I started looking into the books and things like that, all of a sudden I start noticing that as a practice, we are so behind on all of our accounts payables. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the vendors that we should be paying, we haven't been paying. And I know nothing about this. And so I buckled down and I said, man, I'm going to right this ship as soon as I can. And I probably overcorrected a little bit too much. I became somewhat of a micromanager. Even though I had a new manager, but I really started watching everything, and I started putting every bit of money that came into the practice towards paying off all my debts as quickly as possible, which I did. And so, in a matter of, I don't recall exactly. This has been now probably going on 15, 16 years, but I paid everything off within roughly 6 months and I got back on top of things. And since then, again, I look back and had it not been for that unfortunate episode, I wouldn't have learned that I needed to be more involved from a management standpoint in the practice and in watching what comes in, what goes out, really looking at every aspect of things. I started in practice so young at the age of 27. And, one of the bad things with physicians is that we don't get any training whatsoever, not even 1 hour of training on any sort of business skills or running a practice or anything. So I was flying by the seat of my pants, right? From the age of 27 through about the age of my early 40s when this happened. Nothing. I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and I was just going along for the ride. But since then, again, due to that unfortunate episode, that's when the practice actually started being super productive because then I started watching everything, managing, knowing, signing all the checks myself, checking all the bills and the invoices and this and that, and that's when things really turned in the right manner. But as I look back at that, I don't have any ill will at that person. As a matter of fact, that person still occasionally communicates with me on social media. and that person still sends our practice patients that are referred to us. Isn't that crazy? So,
Hmm.
so I don't, I don't have the ill will. I mean, I embrace it, and I try to have a sense of gratitude for what happened because it's helped shape the course of these last 15, 20 years of my practice. Yes, at the time, was it difficult? Was it stressful? I mean, boy, yeah, I thought my world had crumbled, just like I did with the real estate.
Right.
But once you muscle through and you learn your lesson from it, you make a better part of your life from it. I mean, your life can improve, and so I'm just sharing these stories because I'm trying to tell your viewers and tell the world that let's embrace the failures and let's not hold it so negatively inside of us. Let it go, learn from it, right that ship, and we'll be better on the other side.
I just love that. And it's such good advice, not only for the listeners, but for me as well. I have one last question. So I have a global gratitude group. And so gratitude is very much um, part of my teaching. And I help people through difficult times. I work a lot with the bereaved. Um, and so I have a group that's called Just One Little Thing. And so every day I say, what I'm grateful for is just one little thing. The backstory to that is there was a time in my life when I could only hope to find just one little thing. I didn't know if I was going to be able to find more than one. So I was grieving and I said to my son, who is 11 at the time, and my husband, we agreed that if we could find one little thing each day, that we would be okay. And so we would talk about it at the end of our day. What's your one little thing? So my one little thing today is I made some soup for my husband. He has COVID today, so I've got soup ready for him when we finish the call. And so I can give him some comfort. I'm always thankful that my Labrador retrievers behaved during this podcast and didn't want to join in the conversation. And those are all lies. That's just an example of my one little thing. So, what's your one little
Well, uh, I guess what I would say, since I haven't done that much today, being a Saturday, um, but but the one thing that I'm definitely grateful for today, and not only today, but many days, is in particular my wife's support.
thing?
I mean, I'm grateful, of course, for having our children, et cetera. I don't want to diminish that, but basically, here it is, a Saturday, and I'm always seemingly working, doing things. Here I'm doing the podcast. I've been doing other things earlier that are kind of busy work, and yet she is so gracious that she is not one of these spouses who is so reliant upon me that I have to be there doing things with her every minute of the day, that she lets me have my freedom, my independence to do things like this that I enjoy, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. I mean, I probably don't tell her that enough, but I know that not all marriages are like that, and I think the fact that she gives me that level of freedom to get other things done. And I think the reason she does is that she knows ultimately that I am going to do the things that she needs for me to do to help her.
Yeah.
So I don't shy away from that. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I kind of have my own things that I do that she's not directly involved with, and she gives me that freedom. Yet during the work week, she doesn't see me that much because she's in the morning, she's taking our daughter to school. I'm going to work early. I come back, in the evening, and then we have a little bit of time at night, not a lot. And so, the weeks go by, and we don't necessarily spend. a large quantity of time, but, the little bit of the quality of time, I think, is perhaps what makes up for it. And one last point with that is I'll share you a little funny story. We had our once every 5-year big master date yesterday, and then we had his and her. You talk about his and her pedicures and manicures and things like that. Well, no, no, that's not good enough for us. We had his and her colonoscopies yesterday. So that was our date yesterday, and then after that, right after that, as we're waking up from anesthesia, we went across the street to go to IHOP to celebrate and have a nice big blowout breakfast.
That
And
is
it
so
was very enjoyable. I mean, we each enjoyed it. We had some nice time chatting together, quiet time together without the kids. And so it's crazy, right? So each person, each couple, we all have our eccentricities, and ours is that we don't do the normal things that you might envision a couple doing.
I have to say that is the most unique date that I have ever heard of. But you managed to not only have some lovely time with your wife, but you have your screening completed for the next few years as well. So that's
That's
great.
right. That's right. So we're already planning our next his and her date in 5 years.
Well, she sounds like an absolute amazing, amazing woman who,
She is.
and I feel the same with my husband. It's funny the people who stand behind us and are cheerleaders and show us grace when we need it. It makes life worth living. So to finish off, I just want you to tell our listeners where they can find, so they can go to YouTube to see your TED Talk. But where else can they find you, and how can they find your book? Because I want everybody to find.
Well, okay, so I have a personal website that's outside of my practice website, and that's dremiliojusto.com, and that's spelled DREMILIOJUSTO.com. And in that website, I mean, everything is there, from links to both of my TEDx talks, which takes you to the YouTube channel, to there's a section about my book, and there's a link to Amazon. The book is available pretty much almost everywhere where books are sold. So it's not just available through Amazon; it's available through Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, you name it.
Mhm.
Also, just to mention briefly that I actually narrated an audiobook for the book, so it's on Audible also. Um,
Awesome.
but the message behind that is that I must say I had an incredible time narrating that book. I just enjoyed it. I looked forward every day. It was basically on the weekends, and every day that was a recording day, I greatly looked forward to it. It was just one of the I just enjoyed it. Call me crazy, but enjoyed the narration process. And
Uh,
so,
that sounds so fun. It sounds fun to me to do that, and you certainly have a great voice for Audible as well. I'm sure that translated very well. And I have Audible, so now I'm going to have to download the book on Audible as well.
yeah, yeah, please do leave me a review if you would. I would appreciate it. But yeah, but the Audible experience was great, and I did that. I didn't want there to be like a professional narrator, because I wanted my voice out there. And again, someday, whether it be my kids as they get older and let's say I'm gone. I mean, I don't want to be morbid, but I hope that I'm gone before they're gone, right? I mean, the worst thing for a parent is to lose a child before the parent is gone. But my voice will be there. They can listen to that. If I have grandchildren, they can listen to it, and the world can listen to it. So in addition to listening to me on the TEDx stage, they can listen to my book and listen to my voice. And that was part of the grand plan, right? The grand plan is, I wanted to leave a legacy. That's what really started my entire TEDx journey.
That is so wonderful. Thank you for being so generous with your time today. I know we kind of chatted on and on, and I want you to come back again because this was just such a lovely conversation, and I think I want to build on this a little bit. I'm
Yes, no, I
already
mean,
up turning,
it
so hopefully you'll come back
yeah,
again.
it's really been a delight, Kelly. I've enjoyed it immensely. It's a privilege to share the stage with you. Thank you for the honor. And I would love to join you again. Perhaps next time we can talk about one of my other favorite topics, which is obsession, and talking about it in a positive connotation, not a negative connotation. So maybe we can discuss that next time around.
That sounds like a plan. I like that. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.